The hallways smelled of bleach and old paper, the kind of scent that never quite leaves a building no matter how many times it's cleaned. Night had settled deep into the city, and only a few lights remained on inside the towering corporate headquarters. A janitor's cart squeaked softly across the marble floor as Ethan Walker pushed it forward, his shoulders tired, his back aching, his mind already half at home. He was thinking about his daughter's math test tomorrow, when the sharp crack of a gunshot tore through the silence. Time fractured, a scream echoed, footsteps thundered, and in one instinctive, irreversible moment, Ethan stepped forward, placing his body where no one ever expected it to be. Before the story pulls you further in, I want to pause for just a second. Stories like this travel farther than we imagine. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country below. Sometimes it's powerful to see how many hearts are listening together. Ethan hadn't planned to be brave that night. He never thought of himself that way. He was just a single father with a mop in his hands and a photo of his daughter tucked into his wallet, edges worn from being taken out too often. He worked nights because they paid a little more, because the health insurance mattered, because it allowed him to be home when Lily woke up for school. The CEO, Michael Harrington, was supposed to be gone hours earlier, but deals ran late. They always did. Michael stood near the elevator bank. Phone pressed his ear, frustration etched into his brow. He didn't notice the man stepping out from the stairwell. He didn't hear the safety click off. Ethan did. The sound was wrong, too heavy, too final. He turned just in time to see the gun raised, the cold intention behind it. There was no thought of heroism, no calculation of risk, just a body moving before the mind could stop it. The second shot never reached its target. Instead, it found Ethan. The force knocked him backward, pain exploding through his chest like fire. He hit the floor hard, the ceiling lights blurring into streaks above him. Somewhere nearby, Michael's phone clattered to the ground. Voices shouted. Alarms screamed. But all Ethan could think about was Lily, her messy ponytail, the way she wrinkled her nose when she laughed, the lunch he forgot to pack that morning. He didn't know if he'd see her again. Security tackled the gunman within seconds. Blood pooled beneath Ethan's jacket, dark and spreading. Michael dropped to his knees beside him, hands shaking, face drained of color. "Oh my God, sir, don't move. Please. Help is coming," Michael said, his voice breaking. Ethan tried to speak. It came out as a breath. "It's okay." Sirens wailed closer. Someone pressed a cloth to his wound. Ethan's vision dimmed, then flickered back. Michael's eyes were locked on his, wide with disbelief. "Why?" Michael whispered. "Why would you do that?" Ethan swallowed, every breath a struggle. "Because you were standing there." That was it. No speech. No reason grander than instinct and decency. If you were standing there, watching that moment unfold, what do you think you would have done? Be honest with yourself. Then share it in the comments. And if you don't know the answer, just tap like. Sometimes that's our quiet way of honoring courage we can't explain. The hospital lights were too bright, too white. Hours passed in a blur of surgeons, whispered updates, and long silences. Ethan hovered between worlds while doctors fought to keep him anchored to one. The bullet had missed his heart by inches. Inches that would define the rest of many lives. Lily arrived near dawn, clutching her Aunt Grace's hand. She was still wearing her pajamas, eyes red and confused. When she saw her father through the glass, tubes running from his body, her knees nearly buckled. "He promised he'd help me study tonight," she whispered. Michael stood in the corner of the waiting room, unnoticed, suit stained with someone else's blood. For the first time in his life, the company, the money, the power meant nothing. All he could see was a man who scrubbed his floors and nearly died so he could live. Ethan survived the surgery. Barely. When he woke, his chest burned with every breath. Machines beeped steadily around him. Lily sat asleep in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on the mattress, fingers wrapped around his. He closed his eyes again, not from pain, but from relief. In the days that followed, the story leaked to press. Headlines called Ethan a hero. Commentators argued about fate, about courage, about class. Flowers filled the hospital room. Cards arrived from strangers. But Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired and scared and unsure how he'd pay the rent if he couldn't return to work. Michael visited on the third day. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, holding a paper bag. Lily likes chocolate milk, right? Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, she does. Michael hesitated, then said quietly, I don't know how to thank you. Ethan looked at him, eyes steady despite the pain. You don't have to. Michael would later realize that those 4 words would haunt him far more than any demand ever could. As Michael turned toward the window, watching Lily laugh softly at something her aunt said, a thought settled heavily in his chest. One that would refuse to leave. The company he ran so proudly had nearly forgotten the people who kept it standing. And that realization was only just beginning to crack him open as the morning light crept slowly across the hospital floor, touching the edge of Ethan's bed, and the future paused, holding its breath. The weeks after the shooting moved strangely, as if time itself had slowed out of respect. Ethan's body healed in measured inches, skin knitting, breath returning, strength inching back into limbs that had gone frighteningly weak. But inside him, something heavier lingered. Fear sat quietly in the corners of his thoughts. Not fear of dying, but fear of failing Lily. The hospital discharged him with a stack of instructions and a warning he couldn't ignore. No heavy lifting, no night shifts, no janitorial work for months. Maybe longer. Ethan nodded, thanked the doctors, and tried not to let the weight of that sentence crush him. Janitorial work was all he knew. It was honest. It paid the bills. And now it was gone. Grace drove them home. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and reheated soup. Lily helped her father onto the couch, arranging pillows with the seriousness of someone much older than her years. Dad, she said softly, you don't have to go back to work right away. I can help more. Ethan forced a smile. Your job is school, he replied, and being a kid. But when Lily went to her room, he let his head fall back and close his eyes. The silence pressed in. Rent was due in 3 weeks. His savings barely covered one. Medical bills would come next. Hero stories didn't pay utilities. Meanwhile, Michael Harrington couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ethan on the floor, blood spreading, eyes still open, calm even as his life slipped. Michael had built his career on decisiveness, on moving fast and never looking back. But now, every step forward felt wrong if it didn't somehow circle back to that hospital room. He requested Ethan's employee file, not out of protocol, but curiosity. What he found unsettled him. Ethan Walker, age 36, widowed, 1 dependent, no disciplinary issues, rare sick days, excellent attendance, shift changes requested only when Lily was sick or at school events. Michael stared at the screen longer than necessary. He realized with an ache he couldn't quite name that he'd never known the names of the people who cleaned his floors. Not once. A week later, Michael showed up at the apartment. Ethan opened the door slowly, still stiff. The CEO stood there holding a folder and an awkward smile. I hope this isn't intrusive, Michael said. I wanted to check on you. Both of you. Lily peeked around the corner, recognition flashing in her eyes. You're the man from the hospital. Michael crouched slightly. I am, and I owe your dad my life. She studied him for a long second, then nodded solemnly. Okay. Inside, they sat at the small kitchen table. Michael listened more than he spoke. He learned about Lily's love for drawing, about Ethan's late wife, about nights spent balancing bills with prayers. Each detail tightened something in his chest. I won't pretend this fixes everything, Michael said finally, sliding the folder across the table. But the company will cover all your medical expenses, past and future. No conditions. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. He looked up, eyes damp but proud. Thank you. Michael hesitated. There's more. When you're ready, I want you to come back. Not as a janitor. Ethan blinked. I don't understand. I need someone on the inside who remembers what matters, Michael said quietly. Facilities coordinator. Day hours. Same pay as before, for now. We'll adjust later. Ethan stared at him, stunned. Why me? Because you stepped forward when no one else did, Michael replied. And because this company forgot people like you long before that night. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would, right when you needed it most? If yes, write yes and share their name below. Sometimes gratitude deserves to be spoken out loud. Change didn't happen overnight. Some executives questioned Michael's decisions. Others whispered about guilt-driven leadership. But Michael didn't waver. He walked the floors daily now, learning names, listening to complaints, noticing broken things that had stayed broken too long. Ethan started slowly, learning systems, schedules, people. At first, he felt out of place in press shirts and meetings. But he knew the building better than anyone. He knew where leaks started, where lights flickered, where workers felt invisible. And he spoke up. He advocated for safer stairwells, better night security, fairer overtime policies. Each suggestion carried the quiet authority of someone who had bled on those floors. Lily noticed the change too. Her father smiled more, slept better, ate dinner at the table instead of standing over the sink. One evening, she slid a drawing across to him. Two stick figures in a hallway. One wore a suit. One held a mop. Both were standing. Is this us? Ethan asked. It's you, she corrected gently. Before and after, months passed. The company's culture shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. Turnover dropped. Morale rose. And one evening, as Ethan locked up and stepped into the quiet street, a car pulled up beside him. Michael rolled down the window. Walk with me? They strolled under streetlights, the city humming softly around them. Michael stopped, hands in his pockets. I keep thinking about that night, he admitted, about how close I came to losing everything and how close I already was. Ethan nodded. Sometimes it takes pain to wake us up. Michael looked at him, eyes heavy with something like regret and resolve. I want to do more, he said. Not just here, for people like you. Ethan opened his mouth to respond. But before the words could form, Michael's phone buzzed sharply. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting. There's something you should see, Michael said quietly. Ethan followed his gaze as the city lights flickered, unaware that what Michael was about to reveal would test not just gratitude, but forgiveness itself. Michael didn't explain right away. He simply unlocked his phone and handed it to Ethan, the glow of the screen lighting their faces beneath the street lamp. On it was an article, recent, quietly published, already gaining traction. The headline wasn't about heroism or corporate reform. It was about cost-cutting, about a decision made 3 years ago. A night shift security reduction, fewer guards, longer response times. A line-item adjustment approved quickly by Michael himself. Ethan read it once. Then again, the pieces aligned with a sickening clarity. The unlocked stairwell, the delayed response, the gunman slipping in unnoticed. So if that cut hadn't happened, Ethan began. Michael nodded, jaw tight. That man wouldn't have made it past the lobby. Silence stretched between them. Traffic murmured nearby. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded. Ethan handed the phone back slowly. His chest tightened, not with anger at first, but with something heavier. Disappointment. The kind that sinks deeper because it doesn't shout. You didn't know, Ethan said finally. Michael flinched. That's not an excuse. No, Ethan agreed, but it's the truth. They stood there, two men bound by a moment neither could undo. For Michael, the revelation was a mirror he couldn't look away from. For Ethan, it was a crack in the fragile sense of peace he'd begun to rebuild. That night, Ethan barely slept. He lay awake listening to Lily's soft breathing to the wall, replaying the memory of the gunshot, the impact, the cold floor. He imagined what would have happened if he hadn't stepped forward. Or worse, if he had died. Would Lily have known the truth? That a corporate decision, made far away from the consequences, had nearly stolen her father? The next morning, Ethan arrived at work early. Too early. The building was quiet, the way he remembered it from his janitor days. He walked the halls slowly, touching walls he once cleaned, noticing details others passed by. A flickering light, a cracked tile, a security camera blinking red. He stopped in front of the stairwell. It looked harmless in daylight. Ordinary. But Ethan knew better now. Ordinary places held extraordinary consequences. In a meeting later that day, Michael addressed the executive team. His voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him. "We are reinstating full overnight security," he said, "immediately, and we're auditing every safety-related cut made in the last 5 years." A murmur rippled through the room. "This will affect margins," one executive said cautiously. Michael met his gaze. "Then margins will adjust." Ethan watched in the back, unseen, a quiet witness. For the first time, he understood that change didn't always arrive with apologies. Sometimes it came with action and cost. At lunch, Ethan sat alone in the courtyard, picking at a sandwich. His phone buzzed. A message from Grace. "Lily had a bad dream last night. Asked if you're really safe now." Ethan closed his eyes. He typed back slowly. "Tell her I am. Tell her I promise." But promises felt fragile these days. That afternoon, a maintenance worker named Carlos approached Ethan hesitantly. "Hey, you're the guy, right?" Ethan sighed inwardly. "I'm just Ethan." Carlos nodded. "Yeah, Ethan, I just want to say, because of you, they fixed the stairwell lighting on my floor. First time in years." Ethan looked up, surprised. "They did?" Carlos smiled. "Yeah, guess someone's finally listening." After Carlos walked away, Ethan sat there longer than necessary, the weight in his chest shifting slightly. Maybe this was the ripple effect Michael talked about. Maybe survival came with responsibility. Now it's your turn for a moment of reflection. Think about one small good thing you've done recently. Something quiet, something kind. Share below. Your story might remind someone scrolling tonight that humanity still shows up in simple ways. Later that week, Ethan was called into Michael's office. "I want to expand what we're doing," Michael said. "A foundation, scholarships for employees' kids, emergency funds, real safety investments." Ethan studied him. "Why are you telling me?" "Because I want you involved," Michael replied. "I trust you. And I need someone who won't let me forget why this matters." Ethan hesitated. The offer felt heavy, not flattering, but serious. He thought of Lily's drawing. Before and after. "I'll help," he said, "but only if it's real." Michael nodded. "It will be." As weeks passed, the foundation launched quietly. No flashy press. Just changes that reached people who'd never expected to be seen. A receptionist whose medical bills vanished. A night guard promoted and trained. A scholarship letter that made a teenager cry at her kitchen table. Ethan watched it all with cautious hope. But hope, he was learning, had a shadow. One evening, as Ethan packed up to leave, he found an envelope on his desk. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think you changed things. You didn't. Some debts don't disappear." Ethan's stomach dropped. He folded the paper carefully, slipping it into his pocket. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in warm colors that felt undeserved. As he stepped into the hallway, footsteps echoed behind him, slow, deliberate. Ethan turned, his pulse quickening, unaware that the past he thought he'd survived was quietly finding its way back. Ethan paused, every muscle tightening as the footsteps behind him drew closer. The hallway lights hummed softly overhead, indifferent to the sudden rush of fear flooding his chest. He turned fully this time, only to see a middle-aged man in a maintenance uniform slowing to a stop a few feet away. "Sorry," the man said quickly, lifting his hands. "Didn't mean to startle you." Ethan exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "It's okay," he replied, though his heart took longer to settle. The man nodded and walked past, disappearing into the stairwell. But the damage was done. That night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted again. The anonymous note burned in his pocket all the way home. Lily chattered about school, about a boy who cheated during spelling practice, about how her teacher said she had a kind heart. Ethan smiled and responded at the right moments, but his thoughts stayed elsewhere, circling that single sentence. Some debts don't disappear. He waited until Lily was asleep before taking the paper out again. under the kitchen light. The words felt heavier, more deliberate. This wasn't random anger. It felt informed. The next day, Michael noticed immediately. "You're distracted," he said during their morning walk through the building. Ethan hesitated, then handed him the note. Michael's face hardened as he read it. "I was afraid of this." "Of what?" Ethan asked. "Pushback," Michael replied. "Change always angers someone, especially when it costs them money or power." Ethan crossed his arms. "Is this connected to the shooter?" Michael shook his head slowly. "No, he's still in custody. This is something else." The words didn't comfort Ethan. If anything, they widened the unease. The enemy you could see was easier to face than the one hiding behind polite smiles and closed doors. Over the following weeks, the pressure grew quietly. Budgets stalled. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were rescheduled, then canceled. Ethan began noticing looks, too long, too cold. Conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Once, he found his desk drawers rifled through, papers slightly out of place. "You okay, Dad?" Lily asked one evening as he stared at his phone, lost in thought. "Yeah," Ethan said automatically. Then he corrected himself. "I will be." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. He hadn't asked for any of this. Not the attention. Not the responsibility. Not the invisible target on his back. The real blow came on a Thursday afternoon. Michael called Ethan into his office. Door closed, expression grim. "The board is forcing a vote," he said, "on the foundation, on the new safety budgets." "And?" Ethan asked. "And they're blaming you," Michael admitted. "They're saying you're emotionally compromised, that I'm acting out of guilt instead of logic." Ethan felt the words land hard. "So what happens now?" Michael looked away. "If the vote passes, the foundation gets dissolved. The safety measures get scaled back, and they'll ask for your resignation." The room felt suddenly smaller. "So that's it," Ethan said quietly. "All of this undone." "I won't let it happen," Michael said firmly. "You might not have a choice," Ethan replied. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed long after she fell asleep. He watched her chest rise and fall, steady and peaceful. He wondered how close he'd come to losing her future. Not just a bullet, but the systems that valued numbers over names. He thought about walking away, about choosing quiet, safety, a smaller life. But then he remembered Carlos, the receptionist, the scholarship letter, the way people's shoulders had relaxed when they realized someone was finally listening. The board meeting was tense, voices sharpened, words like risk, liability, and precedent flew freely. Ethan sat in the back again, unseen but deeply present. When the vote was called, Michael stood. "This company exists because of people like Ethan Walker," he said, "not in spite of them. If you believe protecting human lives is a weakness, then perhaps I'm not the CEO you want." The silence that followed was heavy. Then a vote shifted. Then another. The foundation survived narrowly, but the cost came swiftly. Later that day, Michael called Ethan in once more. "They won't touch the foundation now," he said, "but they want distance, for appearances." Ethan understood immediately. "You're asking me to step back." Michael nodded, temporarily. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply stood, extended his hand, and said, "We did what we could." As he packed his things, word spread quickly. Hush goodbyes. Quiet gratitude. A folded note slipped into his jacket pocket by someone he didn't see. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had changed. At home, Lily met him at the door. "You're early." Ethan knelt, meeting her eyes. "Yeah, I am." He pulled her into a hug, holding her longer than usual. In that moment, the weight finally cracked, tears sliding down his face, silent and unstoppable. If this part of the story hit your heart, even a little, leave a red heart below. Sometimes one small symbol is enough to say, "I felt that too." Ethan didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew this. He had stepped forward once when it mattered most. And somehow, even now, that choice was still echoing, testing how much courage it truly took to keep standing when the applause faded. The days after Ethan stepped away felt quieter, but not peaceful. The phone stopped ringing. Email slowed, then vanished entirely. The world that had briefly widened around him seemed to fold back in, leaving him once again in the small orbit of home, school lunches, and overdue bills. Ethan tried to tell himself that it was enough. He picked Lily up from school every afternoon now. They walked instead of driving, their route winding past a small park where cracked benches sat beneath tired trees. Lily talked about her art project, about how she wanted to draw people who help other people. Ethan listened, nodded, smiled, yet something inside him ached with unfinished business. One evening, as they sat on the couch doing homework, a knock came at the door. It wasn't Michael. It was a woman in her late 40s, hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp but tired. She held a folder against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. "Yes. My name is Ava Collins," she said. "I'm on the board." Ethan's shoulders stiffened. "You're not welcome here." "I know," Ava said gently, "but I need 5 minutes. Not for the company. For myself." Against his better judgment, Ethan stepped aside. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same place where Michael had once slid that first folder across. Ava placed hers down, unopened. "I've voted against a foundation," she said quietly. "Against the security funding. Against you." Ethan said nothing. "I told myself it was about sustainability. About shareholders," she continued. "But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that admitting we were wrong would mean admitting how much harm we'd allowed." She finally met his eyes. "My brother worked nights. Different company. Similar cuts. He didn't come home one evening." The air thickened. "I buried that guilt for years," Ava said. "When you were shot, it came back. And instead of facing it, I fought change." Ethan leaned back, exhaustion washing over him. "So why are you here?" Ava slid the folder toward him. "Because I resigned this morning. And because this," she tapped the folder, "is proof of pressure, of threats, of who sent that note." Ethan's breath caught. "You know who it was?" She nodded. "A former contractor. Lost millions when the safety budgets were restored. He wanted fear. Silence. Why give this to me?" Ethan asked. "Because you didn't ask for power," Ava said. "And that's why you should have it." After she left, Ethan sat alone long into the night. The folder lay unopened. Answers waited inside, but so did a choice. Turning it in would reignite everything. Lawsuits, headlines, risk. Ignoring it would mean quiet, safety, an easier path. Lily padded into the kitchen in her socks. "You're still awake." Ethan pulled her close. "Hey, Peanut." She studied his face carefully. "Are you sad again?" He considered lying, then shook his head. "I'm deciding something." "Does it help people?" she asked. He swallowed. "Yes." "Then you should probably do it," Lily said simply, and hugged him before heading back to bed. The next morning, Ethan met Michael at a small cafe downtown. No suits, no offices, just two men and a table between them. Ethan placed a folder down. "This ends it," he said. "One way or another." Michael opened it, reading in silence. His face paled. "They tried to scare you away," Michael said. "They almost did," Ethan admitted. Michael looked up. "What are you going to do?" Ethan thought of the night he was shot. The instinct. The step forward. "The same thing I did before," he said quietly. The investigation moved fast once the evidence surfaced. Board members scrambled. Lawyers descended. The truth unraveled with brutal efficiency. The contractor was arrested. Several executives resigned. Ava testified openly. And Michael did something no one expected. He stepped down. At the press conference, cameras flashed relentlessly. "Leadership means accountability," Michael said. "And I failed before I learned." Ethan watched from home, Lily's head resting on his shoulder. Later that night, Michael called. "They want you," he said. "Interim role. Oversight. Ethics and safety. Full authority." Ethan closed his eyes. "After everything?" "Because of everything," Michael replied. Ethan didn't answer right away. "Be honest. with yourself for a moment. After all that pain, could you forgive? Type forgive if you think you could. Or never if it would cut too deep. There's no wrong answer, only truth. Ethan hung up and stared at the ceiling. Forgiveness didn't feel noble. It felt heavy, risky. But he knew one thing with clarity he couldn't ignore. Walking away hadn't brought peace. So the next morning, Ethan put on a clean shirt, kissed Lily on the forehead, and stepped back into a storm he never wanted, ready at last to face what came next. The building looked different when Ethan walked back in, not because the walls had changed, but because he had. The lobby buzzed with tension and curiosity. People recognized him now. Some nodded with respect. Others looked away, unsure what to say to a man who carried both a bullet scar and authority. Ethan didn't announce himself. He didn't give speeches. He started by listening. He sat with night guards who hadn't been asked their opinions in years. He met with cleaning crews during their breaks, not in boardrooms. He read incident reports line by line, staying late while the city dimmed outside the windows. Power, he was learning, didn't need volume. It needed presence. Change followed quietly but firmly. Security staffing became non-negotiable. Emergency funds were protected by policy, not promises. Anonymous reporting systems were set up, real ones this time. When someone tried to push back, Ethan didn't threaten. He asked questions. He asked why. And often, there was no good answer. At home, Lily noticed the difference immediately. "You're tired again," she said one evening, watching him rub his chest absent-mindedly. "Yeah," Ethan admitted, "but it's a good tired." She smiled, like when you fix something that was broken for a long time. Exactly like that. But not everyone welcomed the change. One afternoon, Ethan received a message, short, clipped, "You're making enemies." He stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting it. Fear still flickered sometimes, especially late at night when the building fell silent. But it no longer ruled him. The real test came during the audit. Buried deep in old files was evidence of a massive cover-up, an incident years ago involving a warehouse fire. Injuries quietly settled. Families paid off. Safety reports altered. Releasing it would cost millions. It would also cost reputations that still held influence. Legal counsel advised delay. Not everything needs daylight. One attorney said carefully. Ethan looked at the file, hands steady. Everything that hurts someone does. The report went public. The fallout was immediate. Stock dipped. Media swarmed. Employees panicked. And then something unexpected happened. Messages poured in. Former workers, families, strangers, thanking the company for finally telling the truth, for acknowledging pain instead of burying it. Ethan read every message. One night, long after Lily was asleep, he stood alone in the office Michael once occupied. The city glowed below, alive and indifferent. He placed a hand over the faint scar beneath his shirt, a reminder that courage always left a mark. He thought of his wife, of the man he'd been before the loss, before survival rewrote him. A knock sounded softly. It was Michael. "I heard you release a report," he said. "I did." Michael nodded slowly. "They're furious." Ethan met his gaze. "So am I?" Michael smiled faintly. "You're doing better than I ever did." They stood in silence, not as CEO and janitor, but as two men shaped by the same night in different ways. As months passed, the company stabilized. Slowly, honestly. Trust rebuilt not through slogans, but consistency. Ethan declined the permanent executive role. "I want to build something that outlasts titles," he said. Instead, he helped create an independent safety council, one that answered to workers as much as leadership. It was written into the company's foundation, protected beyond any single person. On a bright Saturday morning, Ethan attended Lily's school assembly. She stood on stage, clutching her drawing. When it was her turn, she held up proudly. "This is my dad," she said into the microphone. "He fixes things." The room laughed softly, then applauded. Ethan felt his throat tighten. If you believe love still wins, even after pain, comment amen below. Let's fill this space with hope. Someone scrolling right now might need to see it. That night, Ethan and Lily walked past the park again. The benches had been repaired. New lights glowed warmly overhead. "Dad," Lily asked, "are you happy?" Ethan thought carefully. "I think I'm whole." They sat together in comfortable silence, the world gentler than it once was. But as the night settled and the city breathed around them, Ethan knew one final truth waited to be spoken, one that would shape how this story would be remembered, not as a tale of bullets or power, but what it truly means to stand for someone else, even when no one is watching. The city didn't change overnight, but Ethan noticed the small shifts first, the kind that didn't make headlines. A security guard laughing instead of staring at the floor. A cleaner taking a full lunch break, without fear being seen as lazy. A maintenance request answered the same day instead of disappearing into silence. These weren't miracles. They were choices, repeated, ordinary, human. Ethan returned to a rhythm that felt almost normal. Morning started with Lily's alarm clock buzzing too early. Afternoons were filled with homework questions and grocery runs. Evenings sometimes meant meetings, sometimes meant sitting on the couch with a movie they'd both already seen twice. The scar on his chest still ached when it rained, but it reminded him he was here. One afternoon, Ethan received an invitation in the mail. Thick paper, clean print, Community Safety Council, opening ceremony. He almost didn't go. Crowd still made him uneasy. Applause even more so. But Lily insisted, standing in the doorway with her shoes already on. "You always tell me to show up when it matters," she said. So he did. The event was held in a renovated community center not far from the old corporate building. Workers, families, local leaders, all gathered in a room that smelled of fresh paint and coffee. No banners, no slogans, just chairs, people, and quiet anticipation. When Ethan was called to the front, the clapping was gentle, respectful. He didn't prepare a speech. "I'm not here because I'm brave," he said simply. "I'm here because someone once taught me that silence is expensive, and someone always pays for it." He looked out and saw faces nodding, some wet with tears, some tight with memories. "We can't undo harm," Ethan continued, "but we can refuse to repeat it." That was all. Later, as people filtered out, a young man approached him, nervous, early 20s, maybe. "My dad worked nights," the man said. "Different place. He didn't make it. But hearing you today helped. A little." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm glad you came." On the walk home, Lily skipped beside him, unusually quiet. "You okay?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how one thing you do can change lots of other things," she said. "Like dominoes, but nicer." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, like that." Weeks later, Michael sent him a message. Not about work. "I'm teaching a class now. Business ethics. First time I felt useful in years." Ethan replied with a simple good. Forgiveness, he'd learned, didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to be chained to the past. The anonymous threat stopped. The fear softened. Life stretched forward again, not perfect, but honest. One night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, were you scared when you got hurt?" He paused. "Yes, very. But you still did it." "Yes." "Would you do it again?" Ethan thought of the floor, the gunshot, the pain, the months of uncertainty. Then he thought of her. "Yes," he said quietly. "I would." Lily reached out, holding his hand until sleep claimed her. Later, Ethan stood by the window, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. He understood now that heroism wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. Sometimes it wore a janitor's uniform. Sometimes it looked like telling the truth when it cost you comfort. And sometimes it looked like staying kind in a world that made it easier not to be. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges. It always did. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel like he was bracing for impact. He felt ready, ready for the final lesson this journey had carved into him. A lesson not about sacrifice alone, but about why it mattered who we choose to be after the danger passes, and how one quiet act of courage can leave a warmth that lingers far longer than fear ever could. The morning sun slipped gently through the kitchen window, landing on the worn wooden table where Ethan and Lily sat eating cereal. It was an ordinary moment. Spoons clinking, milk nearly spilling, Lily humming a tune she made up on the spot. Ordinary and precious. Ethan watched her closely, realizing how much his definition of success had changed. It used to mean stability, survival, getting through another month without falling behind. Now it meant mornings like this. Presence. Being here. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan took the long way home, passing the old corporate building. He didn't go inside anymore. He didn't need to. What mattered had already been set in motion. He paused across the street, watching people stream in, guards at their posts, cleaners laughing together, employees holding doors open for one another. Small things. Real things. The world hadn't become perfect, but it had become more awake. At home, Ethan opened a box he'd kept sealed for months. Inside were reminders of every version of himself. His janitor badge, hospital wristband, resignation letter, the folded anonymous threat. He looked at each item, then carefully placed them back. Not to forget, but to remember without pain. That afternoon, Lily came home carrying a paper crown. "We learn about heroes," she announced proudly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, but my teacher said heroes aren't always the loud ones. Sometimes they're just the ones who don't walk away." Ethan felt his chest tighten. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan sat beside her bed longer than usual. He thought about the moment everything changed, the split second when fear and instinct collided, and he stepped forward without knowing where it would lead. He hadn't known it would cost him comfort. He hadn't known it would give him purpose. He hadn't known it would change a company or himself. He only knew someone needed help. And that, he now understood, was the point. Before this story closes, let me ask you something from the heart. If this journey moved you, even a little, don't scroll away quietly. Tap like, not for a video, but for the soul who carried pain and still chose kindness. One small click can be your way of saying, "I felt you. You mattered." Ethan turned off the light and stood in the doorway, listening to Lily breathe. The world outside was still complicated, still imperfect, still capable of harm, but it was also capable of change. All it took was one ordinary person refusing to step aside, and sometimes that was enough to change everything.